Regarding man's secondary world as being a verbal overlay on the primary one, and how life is what happens and man what explains it, and how life and man would be the ultimate symbiotic relationship, and how man and his mind would be, on a lesser scale, a reflection of that. Maybe we suggest, since we're all either humans or minds, still semi-magnificent. That there's, in other words, still a symbiotic relationship, a direct one between a man and his mind. And how it is, we're bragging all this together, and how it is that without explanation, without man, life would need no explanations, and how without explanations, life would have no men. And how, based on all of those combinations, how it would be that the expansion of life and man's secondary world, how in that fashion, if you can put all that together, then that kind of expansion out here in life, as science keeps playing with it, but in here, how the expansion is, inter alia, amongst other things, that life and that kind of expansion, the whole universe and here, that kind of expansion is not limited to one direction, one time zone, finite dimensions, a single history, or a single form of physics, reason, or thought. Which is about where we left off, if you recall, that you people had got up that little marching band again and made us all realize that the fact that true expansion is non-directional, non-dimensional, is non-historical in the sense of being sequential, and that just to get a glimpse of that, as strange as it sounds, I know at first, if for nothing else, for the immediacy, should show somebody with an ability to glimpse a little another quite valid, inescapable basis for all of the various conflicts in the secondary world, not the primary, forget man fighting for food and etc., but of all the conflicts that men cannot, the best of men at street level, cannot explain why, or they can call upon Captain Irony, but they cannot explain why is it that decent segments of life over here, a large segment of the people over here are Hindus, and right next door, God bless them, are these real nice Muslims, and they're killing each other. What kind of crap is this? What's wrong with humanity? It doesn't make sense. I was trying to exaggerate to get you. If we were ordinary, from there you fall right into the underwear of Captain Irony. You fall right into being sarcastic. And of course, if you got a college education, you fall into being ironically critical. But in other words, you can't, it just makes no sense. And all you're left with is a very limited, and what you said, quite embarrassing position of trying to say, well, people do this because they're dumb. And if a man has any sense at all, which in this fashion people really don't, they eventually look at the end of their finger and they realize I'm connected to the end of my finger through, what do you call me? Start with G's. Guacamole, no? Geneva, no? Genes, aha! Now wait a minute. If that be true, then some way more or less I am, God forbid, related to these idiots. And of course, if you're not really important, then you have to look at yourself periodically. And when you do, what do you see across that gooey divide? You see someone who bears a striking resemblance to, who shall we say? If you look over there, there seems to be this other person. There seems to be these millions of other persons, and they're all pointing at you. Now, wait a minute. Now, sure, I'm not perfect, but I'm not a damn idiot like those people. And they all seem to move. They all go. And you might even say, wait, perhaps I'm being too harsh. And if you know how to look, you look over there, and suddenly millions of other genetic patterns go. I guess that's enough of that. Maybe some of you get the point. And a fellow wrote in, wait a minute, you're just saying that you're a reflection of everyone else. Does anybody remember there's a Kyroot that some guy, I think, wrote the advice doctor or was pondering to himself, is that the point, is part of the purpose of the ordinary to point out the necessity for those other ordinary people to point out the obvious. Wait a minute, you're just saying that you're a reflection of everyone else. Jesus. Fly for that simple. Back to where we were. If you see that there is, really it's not, I shouldn't do many more caveats and warnings and conditions and hints. Even science, physics, plays around at the edges of this, and it gets into, I assume, I keep saying science fiction. I'm glad nobody writes me to try to bring me up to date, but I'm just, when I say science fiction, I mean on the basis of just the general ideas that seep into the rest of the genetic parts of life, of them speculating, trying to look over the horizon as to, the sources of life, or, the first moments, or how are things connected. And you can get a feel today. Most educated people probably get some kind of little feel and think it was some sort of metaphor that perhaps we were trying to come up with a new science fiction plot or something. But if you try to say, because they do keep thinking life is expanding, unless you're a reconstructed, refried Hindu, that life is expanding and it's not going to come back maybe. But at any rate, it's expanding. The universe. But then if you see that, never mind the universe, if you see the secondary world, if you see your world, if you see, and not just you, your world, your neighborhood, your city, and of course those of you that get good, your planet, and then those of you that get real good, your solar system, etc. But if you see in here, the secondary world of man expands, and you should be able to get just a glimpse of this, or just a feel, it does not expand in some direction. That is part of the ordinary intellect's responsibility, is to find directions. Life is happening, man is in charge of explaining it. But if you do notice, everybody knows this, the explanations keep changing. And of course, an ordinary person can say, well, if you're trying to insinuate something real fancy-antsy, that's not true, it's just we learn more and more. Okay. I'm not going to get in an arm wrestling match over that. Have it your way. We learn more. But do note this, there is no, in the scientific sense, as opposed to some religious speculation, let's say, there is no final truth. And I'm sure the scientific world would say, well, thus far you're correct. That would be a sign of an educated man. Follow it. But the ordinary mind still is in charge, even after it would say that, is in charge of specifying what is occurring. Even someone who would agree with what I said, then, if that seemed important and the time was right, then they would want to write a paper and submit it to the Nobel Committee on the basis of affirming just what I said. You follow? In other words, there is no end to what's going on. I agree with that. Wait a minute. Let me write a paper. It's not ironic. There's nothing else you could do. Life is a non-ending process, and it is only the human mind, including real fancy educated physicists and cosmologists, who try to cut it up and put an end to it. And put a period and say, this is it. Even if they know it's going to change, they say, this is it now. And the guy says, I agree with you. Wait a minute. Let me take notes. You follow? It's not ironic. It's the only way that mind can operate at that level. And once you see that, you see what I'm trying to get you to consider. The whole reason, or another way to look at the reason, as to why there can be no continuing, non-ambiguous, non-conflicting ideas about what? Starts with a A. Austin? No. Armadillos? It's associative thinking. Anything! Is there agreement on anything? I guess life could think real hard and say, well, sure there is. All right. Is there agreement on anything of radical significance to life? No. There's not. I wouldn't go stop there, but there's not. If there is agreement, and all this is, as they would say, what's that place that starts with an R? Rhode Island? Relatively. All right, I'll stop. Well, the first few times I did that, several people kind of liked it, trying to think, well, what is it? Relatively speaking, what I want you to understand, people can continue to talk about things when they're gone. PBS even sponsored a show, a guy trying to find Troy. Did it actually exist? Oh, Jesus, give us a break. Well, wait, it's important. Did it exist? Now, you're talking about the place that was Homer's time. Not Homer and Jethro, you people nice. Homer the poet. And they go, yes. And so now you're sending out expeditions to find out if the place existed. Yes. If we were really smart asses, then you could say, people sending out expeditions, and the people out there, they don't know whether they exist. So it's relatively speaking. The point is, people are still discussing, was Moses a real person? And if so, did he have a kosher beard? Did Jesus actually live? And if so, did he ever have a decent job? So they're still discussing things that are gone. But relatively speaking, what I want you to see, there is no common agreement on anything that's of living, pertinent, contemporaneous existence, relatively speaking. If it's alive, if it is serving some purpose in life, forget people's opinion as to what the purpose would be. If it is fueling, if it is passing fuel, if it is transforming energy, then there is no agreement on it. That's why it is alive. People can keep saying that religion's dead, not as long as they're killing each other. And don't be sarcastic and say, well, it just shows that's the wrong religion. That's like saying, well, listen, I won't run my car on Texaco. I'll drive nothing but guff gas in my car. Surprising, that kind of person would probably be a minister. To attack something such as religion on the basis that, well, it is in conflict, but that doesn't prove anything. It proves everything. It proves it's alive. And it's only after that people of limited vision, that is ordinary people, say, well, it may be alive, but the thing is a monster. We've been through that. It's only the ordinary mind that believes we have turned demons, dragons loose in our streets. Sure you have. Well, we want them all shot. Well, lay your mind out there first. Submit. Because that's where the demons came from. That's what the dragons are. That is the riots and the chaos in the street. If it is alive, if it is meaningful, that is, if it is transforming and transferring energy in life, there can be no agreement on it, relatively speaking. Of course, you got agreement within certain camps, all the Muslims. And of course, that's not true, as you know. But we'll say all the Muslims agree, relatively to all the Hindus next door, all the Muslims agree that, well, the whole world should worship Allah. And of course, the Hindus believe something else. And if you're outside of it, you go, now wait. There's no agreement there. They could be talking to what I just said. Ordinary consciousness could say, well, there's no agreement between those two camps, but that doesn't prove anything. It proves they're idiots. It proves we should stamp out religion. They could go on and on. But all they've got is a limited view of saying, well, that is no proof of anything. It's proof of this, that it's alive. And once you begin to see in a certain way, that's the only proof that you need. The promising, only the promising. Kyroot and I debated about that Kyroot, even a short one. But it's, in a sense, only the promising is frightening. That's in the secondary world now. Because the primary world, you can be frightened. Somebody can come up and stick a gun in your kidneys. Of course, in a sense, it's promising. Because the guy, the promise he's hoping for is that you got some money. In the secondary world, it is truly, now forget things such as death and physical injury, because we're talking about the secondary world. It is only the promising that is frightening. That is why that which is alive is always in conflict. The only thing that's promising to an individual is frightening, because if it's promising, it cannot be the tigers that are currently in his street. It cannot be the smells that he currently gets from the oven. It cannot be what he presently thinks. And so anytime you're confronted at that level with something new, it is frightening. And don't argue the word frightening. You could call it all sorts of things. Disturbing, annoying. For those of you that really don't like frightening, well, yeah, it's just annoying. Who the hell wants to change their mind? And of course, you can even whittle it down further and say, well, it's annoying on the basis that it's irrelevant. Why should I care about something new? I mean, I grew up, and they told me that Jupiter had 5 moons. And now they find it's got 6. Give me a break. I don't care whether it has 6 moons. It can have 6. Hell, they can find 2 more. But my God, I'm 50 years old. It's all I can do sometimes to, get it up. I'm just speaking relatively. I'm speaking for other people. I'm tired. My pension fund is, they've squandered the money on some Teamster resort out in Arizona. But you understand, that is still frightening, is what I'm trying to get at. And it would seem an ordinary mind could say, well, it's not frightening because I don't care how many moons goddamn Jupiter's got. But you do. I mean, not that it has some objective importance, but if somebody went through what I just did, whoever that guy was I'm pointing at, that said, hey, don't give me this. Don't lay that crap on me. I don't care how many moons it's got. He does care. Not literally about the moons, but you understand. It is threatening. He could say, no, it's not threatening, it's annoying. Same thing. But it's only that which is promising. And I'm not going to explain much more, drag that out. But you can say the promise is that in that one area of cosmology, that they're learning more about the universe. And so the more they learn, it holds out promise. Well, we're getting good enough now that we can, through this and that procedure, we can now locate, we can identify through computer programs and more information we put in, we can identify now satellites that heretofore, a lot of people with telescopes say heretofore, that we can identify satellites that heretofore we might have thought was simply cosmic dust, or we would not have understood. We would not have been able to recognize in one lifetime because of the area of its orbit that this thing was actually a captive of the planet, etc. And so you can say, well, it's promising. If it's alive, it's promising. If it's alive, it's in conflict. If it's alive, it does not move in one direction. That's why there appears to be conflict. Not that, back to an example, not that Islam is correct at the expense of Hinduism, or that Judaism is true at the expense of the Republican Party. It's not that. But the idea that progress, from anybody's view, that progress goes in one direction, that progress, expansion has one history, that goes in one dimension, at least at a time, and that it has one single rationale, that to a Jew, to a Christian, to a Republican, to a communist, that this makes sense. This is our theory. Now, I forget whether you disagree or not. This is what Marx taught us. This is what Abraham taught us. This makes sense to us. That's true. But it does not make ultimate sense. Because if it did, they would not be in conflict. The whole world would hear their idea and go, Jesus, we wasted 3,000 years. That was right here before us. And of course, some of the people involved, in my example, they go, well, that's what we're waiting on. Well, I hope they went to the bathroom before they got here, took their seat in the waiting room. If it's alive, there can be no agreement. That is the fact that expansion is omnidirectional. It is only the human mind that will identify it, as it should, as to having one history, having one time zone that's happening now, which is the only way that the ordinary mind even can talk about progress. It has to say it's not progress in the tacit part always. You and everyone else to say, well, this is not progress. What you're saying is, this is not progress now. And from that view, life knows what it's doing with man's mind. From that view, that position is unassailable. Because then an ordinary person could try and take some of this and say, wait a minute, sir, you're saying that since religious conflicts continue to go on, that we're not making progress, that real progress would be if one religion took over. But what you're saying is, if one religion took over right now, an ordinary mind could go, well, wait a minute. I almost get a glimpse that you're saying that the only way we can identify progress is if things would change right now, and I could see them change. And if I was dumb enough to go, then by the time I could do that, ordinary consciousness would go, what did I just say? because you have got to cut it up. You have got to turn that process into a noun-sized sentence. Every time anybody, it doesn't matter religion, race, nationality, it doesn't matter anything. Because we're talking about the mind, we're talking about energy, and we're just using the clothes that people's minds wear, known as W's. Wichita. Now, you said you weren't going to do it anymore. Words. Every time your mind, anybody's mind, makes any comment, which it is continually doing, of course, criticizing, and some of you may by now think you have better terms for it. Synonyms are free. Criticizing life. Justifiably so, of course. What you're saying is things should change. Here's an example that there's no doubt. I mean, here's an example. A guy just shot his child, killed it because it was crying. Now tell me that's not progress. That should not happen. The part not said is that should not happen now. In the ordinary mind, if I push that, I saw some of you kind of got lost, or thought you did. The ordinary mind could take that kind of example and say, well, I see what you mean. What you're saying is that over a wide area, that life, I'm still speaking for ordinary intelligence, could be saying, you're saying that life, in a big sense, is progressing. And I can almost accept that. And you're saying that vis-a-vis, a lot of people who don't have telescopes say vis-a-vis. Well, it's a trade-off. He can say, what you're saying is vis-a-vis this kind of one example, this one example is horrendous as it is. And of course, I'd agree, yes, horrendous. If they want my agreement. If that makes everybody. Yes, that's, what you're saying is, looking at from the long range, that this kind of one small example, as terrible as it be, does not belie the fact that life is expanding and getting better. Now, they could go that far. And to them, it's just, pass the beer nuts. Let's have another draft. It's just talk. But it's not just talk. It is the way the mind must operate at the secondary, at the ordinary level. It got no choice. You can't eat an infinite sausage. You cannot eat a bratwurst that goes from here to where the Big Bang started. Somebody got to finally cut that son of a bitch off, or you can't swallow it. So the mind is continually pointing out examples, as it should, that no, that's not right. But what they're always saying, what it's having to say, is it's not right now. That man should not, that's not right. For a man to shoot his son and kill him, a little baby, just because he's crying. What they're saying is that's not right now. Because if you get far enough away from it, I'm not going much further with this, you either got to see or you don't. It's got nothing to do with an example such as that. Other than the fact that the mind would pick that sort of thing out and say, wait a minute, things are not getting better. And of course the proof as always lies where? In the land of PA, Pennsylvania. Don't do that. Personal anecdotes. I know life's not getting better. I'm a philosopher. I went to college. Well, how do you know, sir, that life is not getting better? I'm glad you told me. Let me tell you what I read, which is a personal anecdote, in case you don't know. I tell you say life's getting better. Let me tell you, it was on the news tonight. How about that guy shot his kid? Well, they got you. Back to where we were, which was still the intro for tonight. Hell, we got 10 minutes. In a certain sense, it is proof, the kind of proof that even needs some kind of, not just proof in capital letters or quotation marks, but it's proof that is so proofy, it's almost impossible to hear it, and that is that every conflict in the secondary world, every diverse opinion, every opposing view, is this huge proof. Remember, it's in special neon quotation marks. It's all caps. It's written in some unknown alphabet. Proof. The proof is the fact. It's everywhere. Every time you hear someone says, well, it's going to rain, somebody says, oh, you're nuts. That seems harmless enough. There is proof that weather still exists. There is proof for the time being. That's now proof that life is still going on. And it's also further proof that no one can predict the weather. Oh yeah, but you just picked out two guys. Are we going to have to keep going? Pick out two professional meteorologists. It's not their fault. If it's alive, there can be no agreement. The proof is everywhere. All you got to see is the secondary world in relationship to the primary. Once you can use this kind of example on your own. There is no common currency other than words. There is no agreement. Whereas in the primary world, you do not have that same condition. Remember the primary. You can say, well, there's all kinds of conflict. No conflict. Yeah, they kill each other and eat each other. So? That's not conflict. The only conflict is here. And I didn't make up that word. Humans say it's conflict. And then from there it's just a short step to stupidity, ignorance, prejudice, dumbness in general. It's the sound of life. It is the sound of health, notwithstanding those kind of serious coughs. And now you're hearing life breathe. It is, at any rate, if you'd like to recall where this intro really started, was once you see that life is expanding, it's just my description, I'm using words, omnidirectional. But it absolutely belies, operationally, any limitation to things, the secondary world, not the primary, although it is reflected in life, out in the universe, but here is all you need to worry about to start with. It bars all limits to the expansion of life and man's secondary world to one direction. And it doesn't matter what direction, it doesn't matter where you point, to what religion, what philosophy, what personal opinion. It stops. It's just simply not true. That there is no limit. It's not limited to direction. It is not limited to a single history, which knows I've had the decency not to expand on that one. It is not limited to one dimension, which we've been through several times in other ways before. Is another way that people do not or cannot agree with what is progress or what is good and what is bad. And it is not limited to a single form of reason, rationale, or thought. To see that kind of omnidirectional order of growth from any kind of reasonable description would then show you, you'd see for yourself, that this creates at a local level, here, the observable universe, the maximum in evolutionary efficiency. Even at simple levels, as some of you may have read, they keep playing around, now that I said it, they keep playing around with that. That's in fact how they are oftentimes want to throw in terms in the academic theory of evolution, that life itself keeps trying many things, and survival of the fittest. That which works best is that which nature picks up and it continues, which is a crude reflection of what I'm saying. Except they will, pick out, which they have to. They'll pick out one example of a certain kind of earthworm in a certain place, tried to develop eyes, and then the same branch of that worm family, just 50 feet away, never developed eyes. And ones with eyes began to come out of the ground; they could see. But every time they got out and see a little bit, there was this particular kind of bird that lived there, just swoop down and get them. And so in some way, nature in its unconscious wisdom, or in her unconscious wisdom, decided, well, screw all that. Those birds got enough to eat, and that's going to wipe out the worms if I let them all get eyes, because they get eyes, then they'll all think, well, hey, there's nothing to look at down here. I'm going to go up topside. And as soon as they do, those birds are waiting and going, wham. So it picks out which is most efficient, right? That's a crude reflection, because they picked out what? One direction, one example. Consider it. Instead of Mother Nature trying out all sorts of little things along this area and along that area. And then over here were birds with worms, with fish, with trees. Oh, yeah. What if everything omnidirectional? I mean, what the hell more can I say? Omnidirectional. But from one center point, which you can consider right here, and quit looking for the Big Bang. What was that noise? Consider it's going in every possible direction. That is the maximum evolutionary efficiency. It turns out, what I was going to get to was refer back to a Kyroot from last time. It turns out doing something, I believe it's the Old Testament, I was about to steal a little word from. There's a Kyroot. What this turns into, this kind of omnidirectional maximum efficiency, turns into fathers beget sons, sons fathers. If we'll all strike a pseudo pose of rumination, then if you'll fade out and we'll all leave and turn on the audience, we'll all appear to be asleep, intelligent, reflective, and try and hold this pose until next time. And we'll start right there. We'll all go, oh.